Board Member Durst.
Dursey here.
Board Member Irwin.
Here.
Board Member Burns.
Here.
Board Member Barstad.
Here.
Board Member Ingram.
Here.
Board Member Woomer.
Here.
Board Member Watkins.
Here.
So our next order of business is the election of the chair and the vice chair. And I will run the election for the chair, and then the chair will take over for the vice chair process. So nominations are now in order and open for the chair of the Redevelopment Successor Agency Oversight Board. And this is where the board members will make nominations for their chair.
If Jackie, if you're willing to do this, you run a lot of meetings and you have the relationships with staff in terms of getting the background stuff done. It would seem to be efficient if that's something you're willing to do.
I would be willing to do it.
Okay, in that case, I'd like to nominate Jackie Run as our chair.
Are there any other nominations? There being none, nominations are declared closed, and we need a motion and a second for Jackie Irwin as the chair.
I move that we appoint Jackie Irwin as chair.
I'll second.
And please vote. 5 votes.
Aye.
Let's see what we got.
That's unanimous. And then our new chair
I'm interested in
will take
utilities.
over.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Yes, I'd like to put a name nomination for vice chair, Iris Ingram.
Mr. Watkins?
Yeah, I would nominate Dr. Jeffrey Barstad if he's willing to serve.
Did somebody else already get nominated?
Iris is also nominated.
Okay, I'll defer to Iris.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Can I have a motion on that? First and second?
Lisa, motion for the nomination of vice chair, Iris Ingram.
All right.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Congratulations. Oh, yes, vote. I think that they're...
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have successor agency staff introductions.
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'll kind of be the ringleader of that, but I'm going to, we have a lot of staff here to support the Oversight Board, and I'll be letting some of the department heads introduce their particular staff. But anyway, my name is John Prescott, and I am the Community Development Director for the city and the Deputy Executive Director of the former Redevelopment Agency. And I will be the principal staff liaison to the Oversight Board as you do the work that's been required of you under AB X126. To my left is Scott Mitnick, who is the city manager and is also the executive director of the former Oversight Board, the former Redevelopment Agency. And to his left, you know Linda Lawrence, the city clerk, who just swore you in. Next along the table is Lilia Vaudreuil. She is a recording secretary here in the Community Development Department, and she is serves as recording secretary of the Planning Commission and other city boards and commissions. So she'll be serving as the recording secretary for your meetings. Seated in the audience, I'm just going to do my staff and then turn it over to John Adams. The gentleman with the blue suit, blue shirt sitting there is Bill Hatcher, senior planner on my staff, and he has done a lot of the day-to-day work on preparing the reports, and as you can see, a signature on several of the reports, and arranging and organizing this first meeting of the Oversight Board, and he'll be responsible for continuing support as we go along with our process. The gentleman, Mark, could you stand up? I'm going to introduce you. Mark Town is the Deputy Community Development Director, and he does not have a specific role or hasn't vis-a-vis redevelopment in the past, but he is the number 2 person in my department, and he's here to watch the process as it unfolds. Then in the back row, Russ, could you stand up? Russ Watson is the Housing and Redevelopment Manager in the Community Development Department. And next to him, Lynn Oshida, who is a management analyst in our department and does a lot of day-to-day work with our affordable housing program and redevelopment. I'm going to introduce Chris Norman. Chris, who is the Assistant City Attorney, and he has a lot of responsibilities with the city, and one of them will be to advise the successor agency, the city as successor agency, regarding the unwinding of redevelopment. And then John Adams, our Finance Director, and I'm going to allow him to, or ask him to please introduce members of his staff that are here.
Correct. I have 2 staff members, May Ju, who's in the black. May is responsible for all of our accounting and reporting for the former redevelopment agency, statement of indebtedness, financials. She is the accountant that's responsible or was responsible for the redevelopment agency. Jane Adelman. Jane is the debt and investment analyst in the department, responsible for all of our debt administration and all our investments. And so there is, as you know, bonds outstanding for the redevelopment agency for prior, and she's responsible for that as far as the investments as well. So those are my 2 staff members that are here as well.
Okay, and I did have one more introduction. Excuse me, Laura, could you stand up? Laura Deagle is an administrative clerk in our department who is going to be the backup recording secretary and has also done a lot of work in support of the city's redevelopment and affordable housing efforts. So I think we've got everyone covered here relating to the redevelopment aspects. Back to you.
All right, item 4 is public comments. Members of the public are invited to address the Oversight Board on issues that are within the Oversight Board's purview and not on the agenda. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes, and I have 3 speaker cards. I assume all of them wanted to speak during public comments, and we will have a 3-minute limit on public comments. Our first speaker is going to be Jim Banker.
Thank you. Do I use a microphone or can I just stand here and speak? Whatever I feel like.
Whatever you're more comfortable with.
Okay. Hello, my name is Jim Banker. I'm the athletic coordinator, head football coach, and head track coach at Westlake High School. And I just want to tell a little bit of a story. I was selected as head football coach in 1989 at Westlake High School. And at that time, we didn't have a stadium. In fact, we played our home games at Agoura, Thousand Oaks, and Newberry Park from 1989 to 1993. We had a community action group called Cause that was raising funds to try to put a stadium together at Westlake High School. And over the years, that group had raised some money, and the school district back then was very supportive, and then the city helped us out in the mid-2005, I believe. They helped us with getting the funding necessary to move forward with our stadium. The city, the school district, with a great partnership to put together some really fantastic sports stadiums for the 3 Conejo Valley high schools that we are so appreciative of and really have been instrumental in the successes of all our programs and all of our youth programs, because we have an all-weather turf now that gets multi-use, and it goes from the beginning of the morning all the way until late at night. There's different groups using that. At Westlake High School, we had a two-phase program, and the second phase was to complete our stadium by putting bleachers on the Thousand Oaks side of our stadium. And that project was delayed, has been delayed for 20 years now because of the power lines that are along Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And when we heard that the power line project, underground those power lines, was part of the redevelopment agency, we were thrilled that we could move forward with finishing our stadium. Obviously in the news I've read, and I spoke at the city council in regards to our project and how important it is for our school to complete our stadium, and how important it is for us to underground those lines. And our whole community at Westlake High School is really looking forward to moving with our project. However, it cannot move forward without the movement of those power lines. The power lines run directly over the area where the bleachers would be constructed, and so therefore it would be prohibitive of us putting spectators in that area. So I would ask that, you know, if as this redevelopment agency and all the, I'm not really sure of too much of where we are and where we go, but I just wanted to make sure that our feelings at Westlake High School were heard, and thank the city for all that they have done for the youth of our school district. It has been marvelous, and we hope to continue it. So thank you very much. I also have a rendering of, in 1993, of what we were looking for our stadium to look like, which would include the bleachers on the visitor side of Thousand Oaks Boulevard here, and in 1993 it was part of our overall plan. Obviously we won't be able to move forward with that unless we can have those electrical lines undergrounded. Any questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Coach Bankert. Our next speaker is Kathy Carlson. Ms. Carlson, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President and board members. I'm here to give a rebuttal to arguments I've heard at public meetings and in the newspaper to the urgency of having the funds be given to the Conejo Valley School District to build a new learning center and continuation school. There is no urgency to this. My understanding is that you can dribble out the money. It's about $12 million on your attachment there that would be given to the school district, and I think something like the stadium would be a better use of that chunk of money. Only a couple of you up there understand education law or are experts in it. I will tell you that the Ed Code does not require a city to provide a continuation school. In Santa Clara County, the continuation schools are down at the airport in San Jose. If there is an alternative, such as another district that will take the students, or a charter school. There is a charter school, Learn for Life. They run 2 charters in the west part of the county that are very successful, and they're ready to step in. This would be at 0 cost to our district, 0 cost. They're highly successful, Vista Real. Takes a lot to impress me. This school has really impressed me. I've visited during their open house, spoken to the teachers, the principal there, and also the administrators out in Lancaster. They're ready to take over, and they'd be happy to do it. Now, why is the continuation school in jeopardy of losing their accreditation? Well, it just came to light that for over 25 years they've been giving an illegal test. Old GED tests from 1979 and the early 80s. This is copyright infringement. The owners of the GED copyright were not amused. Their lawyers were very unhappy to hear this. So, WASC, who gives the accreditation, they're very chagrined because there have been irregularities with the visiting staff that has come to our town. Very embarrassing. The Department of Education is very embarrassed because now that school got a model school designation by cheating. Congressman Gallagly is now involved because military recruiters cannot be accepting diplomas with credits that kids got from a 2-hour test in a cafeteria, which is not an accredited testing center by the GED. So I'm saying that there is no urgency, and if you hear arguments, oh, we have to have all of the $11–12 million at once to build this fabulous learning center. It's 7 individual very small miniature buildings that they plan in back of the district office. It's not necessary. So for those reasons, also you have plans in the future of at that Kelly Road site of building a family rec center. I wish you wouldn't. There's a liquefaction area, seismic liquefaction area.
Ms. Carlson, you're going to have to wrap it up.
Oh, there's no time left. Okay, but there is a liquefaction area there, and the back of the property is within a quarter mile of an active fault. I would prefer that that be a green grass park with perhaps one of those stations where you do fitness station. That would be a good idea for that. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. And then we have Mr. Kidway. Mr. Kidway, you have 3 minutes.
I begin in the name of God, who is most beneficial, most merciful. My name is Nick Iqbal Kidwai. One of these days I'll get the mayor to pronounce my name correctly. Kidwai, like Billy the Kid, alphabet Y. Resident of Newberry Park since '79 and Director of Concerned Citizens of Thousand Oaks since '93, and active and opposed to the shenanigans of the abusive Thousand Oaks Redevelopment Agency since '93. The only one person that was active from the city side or even the staff that long is Mr. Prescott, and he was not really that active as far as the RDA is concerned. It's very disappointing and very enthralling to be at Oversight Board because a dream came true with the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies. Being a member of more municipal officials against redevelopment for 10 years, we were fortunate to have Chris Bucket and some activists in this city that we held a meeting of the organization 10 years ago in the library. And then after that, I've been going as far as San Diego and Oakland to attend their semi-annual meetings and seen the rise of Chris Norby, the assemblyman, who was behind the bill that dissolved these. This was one of the, there's no TV or any overhead or anything. Redevelopment, the unknown government. You can see this still on the internet, and it had nice cartoons, and the thing that got the League of California's people riled up was this cartoon that says, blight is everything, anything that that we say it is. And that's one of my main reasons, because of the fraud committed on the people of the state of California. When we have one of the most successful retail business areas in Thousand Oaks to consider it blighted, and that's what the 93 hearings to reconfirm the blight. I take citizenship very seriously. We take taxation to be very seriously, and we do not believe in crony capitalism that Ron Paul talks about, that you give from the struggling middle class to certain people like Rick Caruso, who got $17 million in handouts to build next door. And it keeps, I mean, there's so many things, like little things he's going to have on his private land on Moore Park Road, a theater that will compete against Movico, and there's a billboard out there promoting that on city property. I mean, there should be an outcry about what is going on. It's so disgraceful that I mean, if I apply for a job, I mean, not only do you want to have experience in the general field, but specific experience, because there are 1,000 people that are applying for it. But over here, we have people, even a citizen rep that has been appointed who has probably never even opened a redevelopment budget up until this weekend. And you think that, I mean, this is so simple and easy things that you don't really need to have a background and that you can pore over these things and make the right decision. I'm hoping that the state will audit you folks and bring this money back. I'm all for these stadiums, but it's the tail wagging the dog. There's I have to wrap up. It should really be 5 minutes. I mean, it's disgusting to not let citizens speak adequate amount of time, especially when you don't have enough people over here and you just don't start the meeting on time. Is that there's a debt of $120 million or $160 million now, and so $3 million was given to the stadiums, and so that makes it all right. In fact, there's $2.1 million right now. I'm going to wrap up, ma'am. It's $2.1 million is available in the Dos Vientos funds. You can get that money, but you don't have to steal from the state via the property tax. And I will speak on the ROPS. I have a card on that too. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Kidwai.
Thank you.
We are on action item 5A, adoption of the bylaws, and the report will be done by our staff member, John Prescott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your first order of business and the business items on this agenda are procedural in nature, and then we do have a lot of information items that we'll be getting to at our first meeting. But you are a public body that was established by law, and it's appropriate that you have bylaws for the conduct of your meetings. And so staff has prepared a set of bylaws, rules of procedure. And I'm just going to walk through them pretty briefly, just so you understand them. And there is one issue that we're asking you to adjudicate or to decide, and that is whether you want to make this your regular meeting time and date, and I'll get to that in a minute. Basically, Article 1 deals with your authority and powers, and those devolve from the state law, AB X126. Article 2 deals with your officers. You have two officers, the chair and the vice chair, whom you just elected. And we don't have fixed terms for those. I'm not thinking the Oversight Board is going to be in place for many years. And if it is, at some point in time, the board might want to think about establishing terms for those offices. The chair runs the meeting, the vice chair runs the meeting. In the absence of the chair, they become the presiding officer. Mr. Mitnick, the executive director of the former redevelopment agency, is your secretary, although he delegates that function. And myself and my office will be primarily serving as the secretary of the board. If there's a vacancy on the board, each of you are appointed separately under specific categories established by law. If one of your positions becomes vacant, then that will be filled by whoever appointed you in the first place under that authority. Article 3 deals with meetings. We have scheduled this first meeting, and I'm glad that everybody was available to make it. That's a Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. And we're suggesting that as a regular schedule, it would be the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month at 2 in the afternoon in this room. We do provide for special meetings. There are state laws that govern the notice that must be given of special meetings. And in the event of a cancellation, there's a notice required. We would anticipate, we do anticipate and would like you to schedule a meeting 2 weeks from today, as we'll point out later on. But in the event that in the future we need to, we don't have business items for you to deal with on a regularly scheduled meeting date, then we would notice a cancellation of a meeting if necessary. And that would be done at least 72 hours in advance. Quorum, you're a 7-member body, 4 members is a quorum to conduct business, and under the state law, it actually requires for any action taken by the Oversight Board, it needs to be a majority of the total body, which would then be 4 people in favor, rather than just a simple majority of those attending. So it's very important, I think you all take your duties very seriously here. I know the state of California and all of the people affected by this feel this is a very serious matter, and your representation, your participation is highly valued. But it does take 4 affirmative votes to pass anything, even if there's only 5 people here, which would be a quorum for doing business. Meeting procedure, you can kind of glean that from your agenda that we've given you. And I know many of you are very familiar with the workings of public bodies, but each one's a little bit different. And we've established an order of business to set things in a certain framework that everybody becomes familiar with and is predictable, and people can understand the meeting as it goes along. Call to order, Pledge of Allegiance, roll call. We'll have the minutes from the previous meeting as part of the agenda for the next meeting. Then we would go to any announcements that staff might not want to make, procedural in nature generally. A public comments section, as you've already had tonight, that's a requirement of the Brown Act. And this is really, the purpose of a public comments section is for people to address items that are not on that particular agenda, because they have the right to address any agenda item, but are within the purview of the Oversight Board. So that's something that I think what we heard tonight, or this afternoon, was matters that were pertinent to the Oversight Board, although they might be related to an agenda item. Action items, we're going to divide the business part of the agenda really into two parts. Action items, where we're going to be bringing a specific item to you to act on under your authority, and information items, where we're bringing something to you as an information matter only, where we're not expecting you to take a vote on it. It may be something like the ROPS you're going to hear later on as an information item. We plan to schedule that as an action item at your next agenda. And then board comments, it's just a period for the board members to bring something up related to their business that's not on the agenda. You cannot take action on anything that's not on the agenda, but if you have any requests for staff, or if you want to consider scheduling an item on a future agenda, that would be the time to bring it up. And then finally, adjournment. We have procedural matters relating to preparation of the agenda, the topics you may want to submit, delivery of the agenda. We're delivering them electronically at least 72 hours in advance. And I think everybody must have got it because you're all here. That's good to hear. And the minutes. Article 5 deals with the rules of order, how motions are made, debate. They're pretty standard. I think the one thing that we do want to emphasize, and I guess it's under the section of motion, but I'll get to that under motions. Motions need to be seconded because we have a 7-member body. Many of you are used to working with 5-member bodies where there is no need for a second on a motion, but with this size, we've been advised that there should be a second to motion. So once there's been discussion of an item, an action item, and everybody's had a chance to talk about it, the chair will ask for a motion if there hasn't been one made already, and there does need to be a second to that motion before it can be considered. And then there's section 6-4 relates to the procedure or precedence of motions. So when a motion's on the floor, if you want to amend it, you can ask the maker of the motion and the seconder if they would incorporate your change to it in part of their main motion. Otherwise, the motion to amend would be in order, and that needs a second, and then that gets debated and decided before the main motion is taken up. The board decisions, the decisions you make will be memorialized either in a resolution, and in most cases we plan to have an actual text of a resolution as part of your packet that you can consider, and you would just adopt it. You could say, let's say you agree with it, I move we adopt the resolution presented by staff. You don't need to read the resolution, you don't need to read the title, as long as there's a specific reference to the document you're approving. If for some reason we don't have a resolution and you want one prepared, we would do that and bring it back at your next meeting, and then you could adopt it at that time. Other actions, the second action item on your agenda, for example, are just done by minute action, and that simply means you take a vote on it. It's usually a very simple yes-no type or a one-liner type action, and then that's recorded in the minutes, and that's the evidence that the board took that particular action on that particular item. Article 8 regarding decorum, I won't go into that. I think you're all really familiar with that. Just pretty standard stuff. And some miscellaneous provisions regarding amendments, primarily. and that we're not superseding any laws by adopting these bylaws. Just kind of one other kind of logistical thing I'd like to mention is that you each have a microphone at your desk in front of you, and there is an on-off switch for that microphone. Whenever you speak, you obviously first, the chair needs to recognize you for purposes of speaking, but then please make sure you turn on your microphone and speak clearly into it. When you're not speaking, try to keep the microphone in the off position just to avoid any feedback. So that concludes my presentation on your bylaws and rules of procedure, and our staff's recommending that you adopt the resolution in your packet, commencing at packet page 3.
Do we have any questions of staff? Mr. Jersey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One request is that on the regular meetings, I would request that we move the time out to 3 o'clock. It's just conflict that I have with actually another oversight board that's scheduled at 1. So the other question I had was on section 4-3. No board member shall submit more than 1 item per meeting. Is that, I'm just trying to find the source of that particular item. I'm not used to being limited, let's put it that way.
In the city, both I think at the city council level and maybe either Scott or I guess someone was gone, but with our planning commission, you know, typically agenda items or business items that are brought to the commission or council for decision, and it's relatively rare that the council will or the commission will direct something to us. And that's a rule that's in place for either or both of those two bodies here in the city of Thousand Oaks. It doesn't derive from any greater compendium of parliamentary procedure. It's a kind of a local rule, and we apply it to the boards and commissions that we have. But it's your rules, and it's really up to you if you want to change that.
I don't expect it to be an issue from my standpoint, but I'm just curious. More or less.
Anything else? So what is the procedure if we want to move the meeting from 3 to 5, I mean from 2 to 3, starting time from 2 to 3? Do we take a vote on that first before we vote on the rules?
Well, somebody, it's part of the rules, so it would be appropriate for there to be a motion to approve the rules with the change that the meetings will start at 3 o'clock. If that's, you know, where the maker of the motion would want to go, and then they'd need a second to that motion. But it all could be put into one motion just like that, and then we take care of it.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, could we just have a few more steps? So I'll call you when it's time for the motion. So we have no public speakers, no additional questions, and now, Mr. Dursey.
Okay, I appreciate that. I will make a motion that we adopt the rules and regulations and change the regular meeting time to 3 o'clock on the second and fourth Wednesday each month.
Do we have any comments on the motion?
I'll second it.
All right, vote please.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and we will make that change in the rules and then bring it to the chair for signing the resolution with that particular change in it. And just probably something I should have mentioned as we went through, when you're doing a business item, as the chair just walked you through, that's pretty typical where the chair will have the item called, the staff will give a presentation, the board members then ask questions of staff, make comments, and then you hear from anybody who submitted a speaker card on it, because as I mentioned earlier, each item, whether it's a business item or an information item on the agenda, people can speak about. And then once that's done, then it will just be discussion amongst the board itself and further questions of staff if you need any based on something the speakers might have said. And then at the end, there would be a call for a motion and a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Tresca. We'll move on to action item 5B, and Department of Finance review and designation of contact person for Department of Finance inquiries. And Mr. Prescott, our staff, will present the report.
Okay, one of the requirements of law is that the actions that the Oversight Board takes and decisions you make can be reviewed by the State Department of Finance. That's the same for every Oversight Board within the state. And they are asking to have a specific contact person identified by the Oversight Board to be essentially the liaison for that back and forth communication relating to Oversight Board actions. And so it's our recommendation that, that you appoint me to that.
Do we have questions of staff by the board? No public speakers, no additional questions, board discussion and or motion.
Ms. Earl?
Dr. Barstad?
I would move that we designate the Community Development Director as the contact person for Department of Finance inquiries regarding the Oversight Board actions.
Thank you.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Vote please. Aye.
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 All right, those were the two action items. We are now on to item 6, informational items, and number 6A is the purpose and function of the Oversight Board. Our staff person, Scott Mitnick, the city manager, will present that report.
Chair, members of the Oversight Board, I'm going to ask you to defer to our Assistant City Attorney, Chris Norman. He's going to talk a little bit about the Brown Act and his role, and then I will then step to the other side over there, and I will do items 6A and B, and then we'll have our finance director talk about C. I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Scott. Again, my name is Chris Norman. I'm an Assistant City Attorney with the City of Thousand Oaks, and as Mr. Prescott mentioned, I'm acting as a legal advisor to the successor agency, and by omission, I am not the Oversight Board's legal advisor, and the reason for that is there is a code of ethics that attorneys must adhere to that preclude us from representing two different legal bodies that could potentially be in conflict with each other. There is that potential with the successor agency and the Oversight Board here in the future, and just to avoid any appearance of impropriety, and this is being done pretty much statewide, the successor agency's attorneys are not representing Oversight Board attorneys. Now, the Oversight Board may want to discuss this, and if the Oversight Board feels there's a need, that it needs its own legal representation, or if successor agency staff thinks it's in the Oversight Board's best interest to have its own separate legal representation, we'll make that recommendation to you, or you can direct us to provide you that, and we'd be happy to do that for you. Because I cannot give you direct legal advice, my presentation is going to be very short. In your packet, there is a reference, there's two things that, this is a Brown Act board, so this board is subject to the Brown Act. It's my understanding that each one of you has either been on a board or worked with a board that's been subject to the Brown Act, so this is nothing new for any of you. You're also subject to the conflict of interest rules under the FPPC, so I'm sure you're familiar with those rules. Those can get a little tricky. If you have an issue with those, I recommend that you go to the FPPC website, and they have some good information about walking through the conflicts on that. So attached to your packet is a summary of the Brown Act. I'm not going to get into any detail on it, except that it's there for you as a informational item for you to look at if you have any questions regarding it. I think that ends my part of this for now, so unless you have any questions, I will hand it back.
So now we're considering you part of 6A, right?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we go through questions if we have them, Ms. Burns?
Yes, I have a question. It's come up in the other oversight, boards, if legal opinion is needed by the oversight board, what can be done. And there's been some discussion about locking of the city attorneys between jurisdictions. And you know, I just wonder, some of this here in this city might get complex, and there's a possibility that issues will come up, and I think we need to be prepared of how we'll address those.
Yeah, one thing I would recommend is if you really believe that you do need separate legal counsel in the future, and just as a precautionary step, that the board directs staff to come back maybe at the next meeting with some type of method or obtaining outside legal counsel for the board. And there are lots of things going around about how to do that, who would actually be legal counsel, and I think staff will need a little time to kind of go through all the different options and make the best recommendation to you. I don't know if Mr. Prescott may have some thoughts on that too.
No, that would be the way to approach it. If the board felt it needed needed some kind of legal representation, we need to know, kind of figure out a scope of what it is that you needed, which you would have to give us at a future meeting, and then we would pull together the options and make a recommendation. But it is the responsibility of the city as successor agency to provide staff services to the board, and if it's necessary that those services include legal representation, then we would arrange it. It may be necessary for some boards and not others, and I think that's something each board makes its individual determination on.
And at what point would that determination be made?
It's whenever the board felt there was that need.
There's going to be a question that I'm going to want to have answered before we get into some of the decision-making areas, and that is with respect to conflict of interest. I'm superintendent of Canal Valley Unified School District, and there are several entries on the enforceable obligations list that are going to impact Canal Valley Unified School District. And so while it's not a personal conflict of interest, I'm going to probably want to have some sort of a ruling about whether that represents some sort of organizational conflict of interest, whether or not I can participate as a board member on any rulings made on those specific entries on the enforceable obligations list.
Okay, so can we, without it being an action item, direct staff to look into whether we need legal advice on that?
Madam Chair, you could direct staff to bring back options for legal counsel for the oversight board to consider at probably its next meeting.
All right, well, let's do that.
Madam Chair, I'd probably have the same comment.
Madam Chair, can I make one comment? Could that include some estimate on different costs that the agency would incur?
Yes, there's an issue with how we would pay the council that there's no consensus developed yet about how we would do that. But again, as part of this, staff would make a recommendation about how to fund that as part of its recommendation.
Any other questions? All right, so we'll get some information back at the next meeting then, and let's continue with item 6A. Mr. Mitnick.
Madam Chair, members of the board, because of the position of this microphone, I might step over here, but you can still hear me if I'm not talking in, right? Okay. This is good. What we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the purpose of the oversight board, and we're going to talk a little bit about background redevelopment, and then the Thousand Oaks experience. We feel as staff that it's important that you understand who Thousand Oaks is, the history of our redevelopment agency, and where we were when the dissolution was approved. I think it's really important to understand the context, and that'll help shed some light on what's in front of you for the meetings coming forward. So can we go back to the first one for a second? One before that. The photo here is interesting. This is probably about 5 years ago. This is Gardens of the World in the foreground, the Civic Arts Plaza in the background. Neither one of these would be there if it weren't for the redevelopment agency. In fact, in the foreground, this used to be kind of a rundown bar and a lumber yard.
Well, fun bar.
Yeah, well, it was really the definition of a blighted area. And that used to be jungle land that was abandoned and sat idle for many years, decades. So redevelopment has worked nicely with this photo, and we're proud of this photo. You'll see this photo in a lot of images of the city. Okay, can we go to the next one? I talked about this, let's go to the next one. So the purpose, essentially, all of us, you're here as the board to comply with Assembly Bill X 126. That's what put forward the dissolution of redevelopment agencies in California. And the purpose of that legislation was to dissolve redevelopment agencies to transfer local tax revenues to the state of California to help the state of California balance its budget. In particular, you're here to comply with Health Safety Code 34180 and 34181. So in government, we have a lot of bureaucratic terms, and we're driven, we're heavily regulated, we're driven by legislation. So there's two categories of these two health and safety codes as we understand, and our attorneys have advised us. The potential board actions you have with respect to 34180 is to potentially establish new repayment terms for existing loans. You could recommend refunding or refinancing, if you will, of existing debt. And set aside reserves for outstanding bonds, retained assets for future use, and then ultimately you are asked to approve the recognized obligation payment schedule, or ROPS. Right now there's an EOPS. We didn't coin these phrases, they come from the legislation. The next set of potential actions, oh, you went to it. For Health Safety Code 34181 is the potential dealing with disposition of assets and property. We don't have a lot of that here. We will walk you through that later. To develop a plan for non-ROPS obligations, so obligations that aren't on, items that are not official obligations, if you will. And then to review agreements between the agency and the city. We don't really have many of those. And then to review private party agreements. We really don't have any of those, or that many. Go to the next one, please. Okay, redevelopment background. If you don't already know, it's redevelopment has been a very powerful tool in California for local governments. It's a tool that is used by local communities to aid in eliminating blight and encouraging redevelopment within locally designated project areas. That's the fundamental concept. In order to do that, a local redevelopment agency is allowed to collect and use local property tax increment revenues. And some of the things that redevelopment agencies can do is including assembling local land for local purposes to eradicate blight, and to assist private development where appropriate. We didn't do that in Thousand Oaks, but a lot of redevelopment agencies, that was the key to eradicating blight and rejuvenating an area. So the next one, some other local tools in the toolbox through the redevelopment law, to invest in local infrastructure and in local public schools. We've been very good at that. Money for local infrastructure and local public schools have been provided for decades in Thousand Oaks that would not have been provided otherwise. Construct affordable local housing units. To create local jobs and stimulate the local economy. Retain local property tax revenues with the taxpayers that pay those taxes. And most importantly of all is to provide for local control. What is tax increment? A lot of different things out there in different communities. I work in 4 different regions of the state, and it's interesting the perception of what tax increment is and what it isn't. It's quite simple in that it's the incremental increase in property tax value within a project area. And we'll talk about that in a moment. There's a nice chart. But it's the redevelopment agency comes in, establishes a project area, the rise in property tax value, that essentially is the incremental gain. The premise is a revitalized project area will generate greater local property tax revenues than would be the case without redevelopment to eliminate blight, produce affordable housing units, fund local public infrastructure projects, and actually local school projects that would not otherwise take place. Agencies collect the tax increment revenue subject to statutory and other pass-through agreements. And it depends on the time in which, the redevelopment agency was established. I've worked in cities where the redevelopment agency project areas were established a long time ago and they passed through nothing. And over time, the state passed statutes that required pass-through agreements. When we established our agency in '71 and then really got going in 1978, this city was ahead of the curve and it had very generous pass-throughs for the county, the park district, the school district, etc. When there was no law requirement to do so, it did so. And was kind of leading the pack. Agencies do have to show, or the primary mechanism to pay, for the tax increment is the primary mechanism that's used to pay debt that's used to develop projects and invest in the local community. And redevelopment agencies have to show debt in order to collect the increment. Here's a good visual. So on the bottom, when a redevelopment agency is established in Thousand Oaks, we have two project areas that were essentially established back in here, say 1978. You freeze all the taxes, the property taxes are frozen, and all the local agencies get their base amount. So the county gets its share, the fire district would get its share, the city would get, well, we had none at the time. I'll talk about that later, we didn't get any. All the agencies get what they have. And then if there are any statutory, see this red line? 0. When we were going at the beginning, you didn't have to do it. And then over time there were required statutory pass-throughs, but you have pass-throughs where you pass money through to help make the other local governments whole. We were very concerned about the school district, always wanted to make sure they were whole, and that was the case. In the county, they actually are better off with Thousand Oaks Boulevard, not better off necessarily. We're very close to breaking even with the other project area. But these are the pass-throughs, they go to the other agencies. 20% is used for affordable housing. This right here, the purple, is what the redevelopment agency uses to pay off its debt and to pay for local infrastructure and related activities, as well as a small sliver is used for staff. So this is tax increment here. This is not Thousand Oaks, this is sort of a hypothetical example. Our case, the values kind of shot up about here and went up like that. Now the state of California, by the way, for the amount that doesn't flow to the school, they're legally obligated by Prop 98 to dedicate 40% of the state's general fund to schools. So the schools were made whole, and through ADA, they're backfilled on a per capita basis. So the schools were getting a net gain out of this here in Thousand Oaks. Okay, we'll go to the next one. The purpose of, so the purpose is to eliminate blight. We talked about that by promoting private sector reinvestment. If you think about it, where you establish project areas, the areas are not, they have blight and they're not doing well on their own. The private sector isn't working. So the goal of redevelopment is to help prime the pump or jumpstart it. Promote local economic development and create employment for local low and moderate income residents. You're creating jobs, often construction jobs, that type of thing. Provide a variety of affordable housing units that would not otherwise be the case. Provide other types of local jobs, and provide local public infrastructure, school funding. Okay, now talking about the experience here in Thousand Oaks. We have a great story. It's a wonderful story. It has a sad ending, but it's a wonderful story. The city incorporated in 1964. The founding fathers had a vision for the city. That's why they incorporated. They had, if you go back, and John was here in the very, very early days, but you look at some of the documents that the council passed, and then the general plan, one of the first cities in the state, if not the country, to have a general plan in 1971, they were calling for a civic auditorium. So the founding fathers, when they were elected, they said, we need a central gathering place. Redevelopment was used to build it. You're sitting in it today. So the agency was formed in 1971, but it really wasn't used in earnest until 1978. It's about the time Prop 13 passed. Wait, can you go back one? And it was viewed as a critical mechanism to implement the founding fathers' long-term vision for the community. I ask that you take that into consideration. This wasn't something that was taken advantage of to bring the city money. We were a no-tax city, and the founding fathers, when we incorporated, said we're going to rely on sales tax, because we didn't have any property tax. This became a way to pay for infrastructure that the community desperately needed. Because Thousand Oaks back in the early days was much different than what you think it is today. It was much, much different. It was much lower income. It was struggling, and it was trying to become somebody. I mean, we had nothing, really, except for a desirable location. Next. Okay, today, recently, we have two remaining project areas. Historically, we've had a few others, but essentially two. Thousand Oaks Boulevard. And you have a copy of the presentation. You also have maps, and we'll get to that in a moment. So Thousand Oaks Boulevard was formed in 1979. Newberry Road project area was formed in 1984. Again, they were formed to help. At the time, we were a no-tax city. Kathy Wright, a senator who passed away recently, played a key role in making us a low-tax city. Of all the cities in this county, we are tied with Camarillo in getting the smallest sliver of property tax. So this was a tremendous mechanism to help the local community keep some of the taxes that were paid. By the way, these two project areas, 5% of the city's total land. 5%. You've heard the stories about cities like, I shouldn't mention any cities, I'll get in trouble, I'll offend somebody. A lot of cities that put the whole entire city in a project area. Communities in the desert, they consider blight to be dirt. that we have a little less than 5% of our land mass. That is important to know. 95% of the city not in a project area. So, and I want to make it clear up front, we've never used eminent domain for redevelopment purposes, and in fact, the ability to continue to use eminent domain lapsed in 2005. We had the opportunity to extend it. Some cities did, we did not. This is a good overview showing you where property tax dollars go in Thousand Oaks. See this little blue sliver here? So every dollar of property tax, we get 3.5 cents. That's what it means to be a low tax city. If you're in a city like Burbank or Ventura or Oxnard, you probably get closer to 20 cents. Now it is true, for full disclosure, our library gets a few pennies and we benefit from that. The fire district gets 15 cents. The fire district gets like 4 or 5 times what we get. And the county gets 15%, and then the school district from the state gets what comes out to about 1/3. So if you go back in time, the city incorporated too late in the game. If they would have incorporated in the 40s or 30s, we would have a larger share. But that's what happens when you're a no tax, now low tax city. You can look at that more. And if you have further questions, you can always call us. We'll be glad to walk you through it. This is a map of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard project area. I should write a pointer. Essentially, it follows around the boulevard. And if you're wondering why are some parcels in and out, at the time the city, when it formed this, when the redevelopment agency formed the boundaries, it would take residential properties in if they wanted to be in. If they didn't want to be in, they wouldn't take them in, and that's why it kind of moves around. See this little flag here blowing that way? That's Moore Park Road up on top. That's Thousand Oaks High School. The wisdom at the time, they wanted to help do infrastructure work at that school. And the way to do it, you didn't have to do it in those days, but they put that in there so there'd be no question. In the old days, you could do projects outside the project area if you did findings of benefit. I worked in a city that redid all the fire stations, even though they weren't in the project areas, findings of benefit because they provided service to the project area. We also have Westlake High School in the boundary. Okay, that's the boundary of the Thousand Oaks Boulevard redevelopment project area. Now, interesting, it was adopted initially in 1979, 1,279 acres. The base year valuation was 125 million. Today, 1.9 billion. Okay, so redevelopment works. That's just a reflection in the values that they've risen. The cumulative gross tax increment, 306 million. Now, the plan expires in 2021. So we've been preparing for the end of this redevelopment project area. We've been taking steps. The mayor is aware of this, how we've been developing in lieu of fees and so on for housing, because we knew we're coming toward the end. For debt purposes, it would be around to 2031, so we could retire debt. We'll go now to the other project area. This is Newberry Road, so this is the 101 freeway. For those of you who came from the Ventura area, you came from over there, and if you go that way, you're going into the LA area. So it's primarily this area here, south of the 101. It includes the continuation high school and some school district properties. And so they're vitally impacted by this. Some of the stats on the project area include that it was adopted in 1986. It's small, 273 acres. And by the way, both project areas are relatively, this one's really small. The Thousand Oaks Boulevard is small in comparison to what you find in other communities. So the base year was 27.8 million. Essentially, it's gone up 10 times. Not the same jump as the Boulevard. The cumulative gross TI is 27 million. The plan expires 2027, and for debt service purposes, 2037. Okay, so how do we actually spend our money? We get roughly 23 to 25 million in tax increment in the aggregate. Where does that money go? And this is the Thousand Oaks story that's different than what you'll find in many other cities. Certainly different than the other regions of the state where I've worked. Over 60% of the money that comes in, we pass through or put into affordable housing. Very high. So now you can see who's really benefiting here. Debt service is 25%. Many places that number is much higher. So that leaves then 15% that can be used for new capital projects, but historically, the state's been taking our money. The last one was 6 million. So the state has been coming in taking, because it has to balance its budget, and it does ERAF and all these other things. And so for staff and cost allocation, we're at 5.5% on the low side. I didn't realize this, but I've been reading about these cities where 20 or 30% of their tax increment would go to pay for police and fire and a whole bunch of other positions. Westminster is a city, I don't have any knowledge of it other than what I've been reading. I don't know any of the players there, but they're having to lay off a whole bunch of people because they were funneling the money in to pay for a bunch of staff. Okay, we have generous pass-through agreements, and when I use the word generous, it's not our opinion, it's based on what's out there in California. Over 40% of the money now goes for pass-throughs. Because we have an escalating cap with the agency, with the county getting more as time goes by and the value goes up, that number goes to 48% by the end of the life. So some of the other taxing agencies, for the TOB is Thousand Oaks Boulevard. For the county, they get 28% of that because it's a rising cap. And for Newberry Road, it's 17%. The Park District gets 5.3. The school district gets 5. That 5% is above and beyond the ADA money that they get. They have to use that for capital projects. Fire department gets 5%. State takeaway, it's been as high as 5%. And we realize it's just a regular fixture. They can't balance their budget. The community college district, 1.8. The library, 1.4. The county gets a tax administration fee, 1.2. That's above the pass-through. And so if the county were to get all that money, they wouldn't charge themselves a fee. And then there's a whole series of other entities that get small slivers. Let's talk a little bit about affordable housing. That's 20% of the total. This is where Thousand Oaks shines. We are the leader in the Tri-County region in terms of amount of tax increment that's generated for housing and the amount that we spend and the units that we produce. And we often will put more than the 20% set aside in. We'll use other redevelopment money or CDBG money or other sources. We're proud to tell you that we are the headquarters for many mansions and the Area Housing Authority. Their offices are here. We've done all kinds of projects. You have a document here that delineates the projects that we put money into. Go to the next one. Now, I'm proud of the city council. A lot of cities don't want to do affordable housing. It's something they dread, they hope they push off, they hope somebody else will take care of. Our city council steps up and it puts in a lot of money to build projects. That's going to go away. And if you drive around Thousand Oaks, you ask, well, where are the projects? You won't know by looking because they blend in. We have such high development standards, we don't waive any of the standards for the affordable projects. So the amount of money spent, over $52 million, over 2,200 or nearly 2,200 units, benefiting literally tens of thousands of low-income families, low-income seniors, as well as disabled people. Over $20 million alone in the last 6 years have been spent on affordable projects. Tens of millions of dollars in other projects have been planned that are now going to be history. We do more than just producing housing units. We actually subsidize a whole variety of programs. We have about, John, is it 600 seniors on the HAPS program? 200, I'm sorry. 200 low-income seniors who get a quarterly payment to pay for their utilities. That's going to go away. That's called the HAPS program, Housing Assistance Program for Low-Income Seniors. And it's going to be very difficult when we have to send a letter to them and say, this is over. Hopefully we can figure out a way to keep that. Housing Rehab Program for low-income and disabled residents. That's primarily our senior residents that live in mobile home parks. They're able to get $5,000 to $10,000 loans. I think that's right. And if they stay for a certain number of years, it's forgiven as a grant. That program looks to be going away. First-time homebuyer subsidy programs for young couples and stuff like that, that appears to be history. Homeless programs, we would spend as much as $100,000 a year or more helping out with homeless programs. Kathy Berdinke's group, escapes my memory, the name, but we would and do homeless counts and that type of thing. Tenant-based rental assistance program, these are subsidies to help people when they're waiting for their Section 8 payments. That'll go away. And various other housing services and funding programs, that appears to be history. And here's some numbers to show you the first-time home buyer program, 400 loans, 3.4 million. The housing rehab, 730 grants. The tenant-based rental assistant, 76 grants, etc. Here's a sample of affordable housing projects. The investment, nearly 2,200 units, I mentioned this before, rounds up to 53 million. Here's some photos of some of the projects that we're very proud of, the Shadows Apartments. We'll just go through and you can see the dollar amount. Here's Oak Creek Villas. This turned 10, right? 10 years old? I remember being here for the groundbreaking. That was a complex project, very difficult. Hillcrest Apartments, another one to be proud of. This one's under construction. This is probably the last of this type of project in Thousand Oaks as far as investment from the local community. Los Feliz land acquisition. This is the Area Housing Authority project behind Gardens of the World, correct?
correct.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe this doesn't even come to fruition now. Other examples, Bella Vista, Hacienda de la Fiz, Richmond Terrace, Shadow Hills, Shiloh Gardens, that goes back to the beginning, bond issuance. Kind of sad to see these because we work so hard on them. Now, other uses outside of housing, the more traditional redevelopment, the 35% piece, if you will. Bond payments suck up 25% of the 35%. And then new capital projects up to 5% a year, but it's now typically state takeaways. Staffing's 4%, again, very, very low. We have about 7 positions equivalent to it that are staff in housing and redevelopment. Professional services other up to 2%. Cost allocation, cost back to the general fund for the services and general funds for the redevelopment agency that exists, that's 1.5. Program we're proud of, commercial revitalization grants to help the older distressed businesses in low-income areas, to help the buildings from the 50s and 60s, to help with the facade improvements. Been a terrific program, lots of money spent over the years. That's going away. Here's some photos of some of the projects I already talked about. This is our biggest one, Center Gardens Plaza, going back to the founding fathers' dreams. And here's just a list that we could come up with for this here. You know the history of Thousand Oaks? It wasn't always a nice place. The boulevard had ticky-tack development, rundown bars, rundown businesses, billboards. I wasn't aware of this, but apparently a lot of septic tanks and stuff like that. The agency came in, got rid of every billboard, or played a role in getting rid of every billboard, and helped get rid of the septic tanks. Street resurfacing, we did that recently a few years ago. Drainage improvements, streetscape improvements, angled parking project, West Side property acquisition. The child care center across the street, agency did that. Here's some visuals of some of the stuff we've done. Here's some other projects. The Park of Peace Park, or the Park of Peace. Sorry, that's we did that. The Auto Mall parking and landscaping project, so that's moving forward. The Auto Mall sign does not have any redevelopment money in it. The commercial revitalization program grants, I mentioned that. We've done a lot of flood control projects. Another park improvement. The Hampshire widening in the Greenbelt as you come in off the freeway, that was redevelopment. And that was really blight and issues. The Cayugas water tank, we played a role with that. Fitzgerald House for seniors, we helped with improvements there. There's some visuals. These are some of the smaller projects. Flood channel. And again, Moore Park Road widening and median landscaping, boardwalk crossings, widening, Canal School Road widening. These actually help the schools as well. The Greenwich Village road paving, the Camelot demonstration project. That's a cool project. Royal Oaks model neighborhood, and bike paths. Here's some visuals. This was somewhat controversial at the time. It was a former gas station, I guess, Gasco. And then, so the agency came in and bought it and beautified it. This is on the boulevard, little green belt, so it's not all about buildings, that type of thing. Some more landscaping. The master plan for the boulevard, Sears parking lot improvements, many years ago, we did that. Now, the last one, Thousand Oaks Boulevard specific plan, this was 2 decades in the making. And the private local businesses finally took control, came forward with the draft plan, and then the redevelopment agency paid for the environmental impact report. That was approved recently, and one of the reasons we have money, the balances we do, we were waiting on that to get approved. Then we were going to go forward and do a lot of the projects, especially the undergrounding of the utilities that you heard Coach Banker talk about. That's a big dollar item, north of $14 or $13 million. So we've been waiting. Had we known the state was going to confiscate all this money, we would have spent it way in advance on the utility project for sure. So the boulevard, we just got a statewide award for that specific plan in recognition of its forward thinking. Here are some of the benefits. Now you look back and say, okay, from 1979 to this day, what are the benefits? The building you're sitting in is a benefit. The boulevard looks totally different than when John Prescott started working for the city. And it would not be what it is today without redevelopment. And the billboards might still be there. A lot of blight has been eradicated. People talk about there's no blight on the boulevard, you shouldn't exist. We had blight. The redevelopment agency worked, and we're in the 3rd quarter of the redevelopment agency, where we were, so you got to continue all the way through. Beautiful redevelopment, the lakes, gardens of the world, Mastro's, a lot of stuff would not be here. This was a very poor part of town, and with this building, we wouldn't be here. The tremendous multiplier effect. We can spend a lot of time telling you about businesses that are here because of it. I'm going to give you an exciting new business example. And I think, John, you were with me when they came to meet with us. Rolls-Royce and Bentley want to come into Thousand Oaks. It's not official yet. But they sat down with us and they told us that they had all these other options, but they were so impressed with the Civic Arts Plaza, the fact that we have 3 Caruso projects, and how nice the boulevard looks, and just a great place to be. And all the compliments they were giving us in this meeting, I kept thinking, that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the agency. So we'll see if they come to fruition, but they want to come in here. And by the way, businesses don't ask for subsidies. Now I have this photo here because I want to show you the undergrounding of the utilities. This was from 2005, so this isn't something that was dreamt up. This is when we did the refunding, and one of the major driving forces for us was to get rid of these utility lines. And we're hopeful that project can still come to fruition. The benefits to the school district are not just to build the stadium, it's also for public safety. Those lines go drive by Westlake High School. They're within feet of the area where the kids have their sports and they recreate. Plan projects, since the specific plan was approved, we were getting ready to do the streetscape projects, the medians and the parkways and the landscaping phases 2 and 3. Public parking improvements, that was really important to the business owners to help deal with the parking issues on the boulevard. Public parks and open space, we do use redevelopment money for that purpose. Herbs Road, which is in the project area, there was some undergrounding that we were planning to do with redevelopment money. Discovery Center, this is a rendering of it. This has been in the works for years and years and years. In essence, the Children's Museum. You go back, look at the specific plan for the east side where the Lakes project is. It had called out for years for there to be a Discovery Center, and that's in the specific plan. So $5 million was appropriated in a holding account so they could go out and fundraise the rest of it. The Regional Art Museum, on the west side properties, the council approved the zone change last night. There is a formal group, they're fundraising in their vision to complement the civic arts, or the performing arts theaters, is to have a regional art museum, and that's the part that's circled. Okay, I'm going to shift gears, Newbury Road, and this is not as long as Thousand Oaks Boulevard. So the examples of the projects done there over the years is the first phase of the Kelly Road storm drain improvements. Dr. Barsted's fully aware of that because there's some major drainage work that needs to be done, and the first phase has been done. We hope that we can keep phases 2 and 3 alive. Orchard Road interchange, we did that. Orchard Road overcrossing, Newbury Road and Vintu Park, the traffic signal there, and a number of business facade improvements. Those are a sample of what we've done. What was planned? In essence, tremendous assistance to the school district was planned. Family entertainment, or Family Recreation Entertainment Center, that was envisioned to be where the Canale Valley Continuation High School and the school district's bus maintenance facility is now. The plan that they need to get off of that site. Both of those sites, I'll say it because I know the superintendent thinks it all the time, they're deplorable. They need to be relocated. And then a family entertainment recreation center, and by that we're talking about ice skating, a bowling alley, those type of uses that the community is crying out for, that the private sector will never provide on its own. They just can't make a go of it, the land's too expensive. Part of this was to save the historical preservation of Timber School. Without redevelopment, that's probably not going to happen. And there's the Kelly Road, the $2 to $3 million worth of storm drain improvements that are needed, phases 2 and 3. Additional landscaping and median improvements, a variety of streetscaping and public parking improvements, and of course the assistance to the school district above and beyond what they would get for the purchase price. Okay, speaking of the school district, the sample of the school facilities projects, the 5% pass-through, the towpass, the Thousand Oaks, I don't know what that stands for. Pass-through agreement.
Thousand Oaks, let's see.
Plan to assist school sites.
Yeah, so that's the agreement. We use acronyms because we speak too much. So topaz agreement. So $15 million that we could find has been spent on a variety of school district projects that would not have been provided without the school district. If we didn't have a redevelopment agency, none of that would have happened. And Coach Banker, the Westlake team, they wouldn't have the fields that they play on, and then the other high schools as well. So we put money into performing arts centers. If you go by Thousand Oaks High School, that's why the line was drawn up there. They have a beautiful performing arts facility. Redevelopment paid for that. And the other, I think the other two are the
developer fees.
Developer fees. And swimming pools, we put money into that. When I say we, I mean the redevelopment agency, football stadiums. So we also put developer money into football stadiums, developer funds. So we leverage money. one of the high schools, the pool scoreboard, parking lot improvements, classroom additions. We historically over the years in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools help pay for those costs. Play areas, district office, some minor site improvements, maintenance and repair projects, the kind of the bread and butter stuff, HVAC repairs, roof repairs, drainage improvements, asphalt. And then today, there's $7.6 million in a holding account, and we're fighting hard for the school district to keep that on the list so they can use that for the projects that they've envisioned. We feel we have a strong case to be made on in terms of an obligation list. And it also reflects the strong relationship and healthy relationship the city has with the school district. Many cities and school districts are at war with each other. It's not the case here. If the school district doesn't do well, we don't do well. So we feel, in summary, that our redevelopment agency has been a tremendous success story. We fully comply with all state, local, regional, national, whatever reporting requirements. We do the 5-year plans in the mid-year updates that the state requires us to do. We have an outside auditor that comes in. Our finance staff are second to none. We're fully accountable and transparent. We have public meetings. All decisions are made in front of the public. And we have historically faithfully implemented the Founding Fathers' vision. Okay, so what are the impacts of dissolution? And they're profound. Profound. I'm trying to tell you a positive story because it's going to have a profound impact on the community. The state ended a very successful redevelopment agency in the middle of the third quarter. Coach Bankert would tell you, if you're winning in the third quarter, you don't walk away, you keep going to the end of the game, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to get through the next decade and wrap up these projects and build the projects that the specific plan for the Boulevard envisioned, including the undergrounding of the utilities. So we have over $50 million in net tax increment that'll be gone if we're not successful. There's $22 million in cash right now, and we feel almost ashamed that we've been so conservative and so frugal that we have the money in the bank for these projects. Because we didn't have this artificial legal obligation or whatever, that the state can come in and take it for its purpose. That money that the state takes, none of it comes back here. Zero. Millions of dollars in affordable housing appear to be lost. That money's not coming back. There will be significant local private sector job losses. I will tell you, the mayor knows this, had the state not did what it did a couple of years ago, we would have $20 million more, actually more than $20 million worth of projects under construction right now. The undergrounding of the utilities at Herbs, undergrounding of the utilities on the Boulevard, the stuff at Kelly Road. We would have lots of jobs right now, people working, and the community would be better off. Future projects won't get funded, so loss of numerous public infrastructure projects, loss of many affordable housing projects, hundreds of units won't get built, loss of millions of dollars in capital projects for the school district potentially. Public safety impacts. Because we have impacts on the general fund, we're going to have to cut back in police. So this somehow benefiting public safety, not in our world. Municipal jobs, we will have to do layoffs and we're going to lose positions. And then the cost allocation to the general fund, about $450,000, we're going to have to make up for that. And you know, the police department and public works are big operations, and they're going to have to absorb some of that. So strong final thoughts. We've had a tremendous record of success. We're proud of it. I appreciate your indulgence, so let me tell you the story. Premature end, significant negative local impacts. We were not able to fully implement what our Founding Fathers' vision was. Loss of local control. Clearly the state benefits, but the local community faces the challenge now to make up for the lost revenues, projects, and services. Is there a next one? Okay, so that, I'm sorry?
No, that's the last one.
Yeah, so that is kind of the overview of our agency, and again, I appreciate your indulgence. If you had any questions about that, staff is available to do that, or we could talk now about the recognized obligation payment schedule.
Let's first see if there's questions, and we have a speaker on this too,
okay,
before we go on to item C. Do we have any questions of staff? Any members? No? All right.